We're good to go.
Yeah.
Okay. Greetings, everyone.
Oh, thank you, Miriam.
It's really my pleasure to be able to do this for you. I'll just start by saying that I'm lending my full support to this wonderful organization, PCP Wales, and the amazing women behind it. I wish that I could do more. If I could get on a plane and come over there and stand with you in one of your Sunday demonstrations, I would do that in a second. So what I'm doing today is explaining from a medical perspective the dangers of RSE, relationships and sexuality education, that your government is trying to impose on you, the people of Wales and your children. I've been involved in this area of sex education for a long time now, and I want to tell you how that happened. I'm a psychiatrist, and I was working with students at one of the biggest universities that we have here in the United States. It's in California, the University of California in Los Angeles, also called UCLA. And I was a part of a clinic there on campus in which we saw thousands of students every year for all sorts of problems. And I noticed, I noticed that a lot of the young people that were coming through my office at the university, and they were essentially between the ages of, let's say, 18 and 30, let's say, but most of them between 18 and 25, and most of them young women. And so many of them were coming in as a result of the choices that they had made in their sexual lives. In other words, they were very upset because they were diagnosed with an STD, or they were having a pregnancy scare and they were terrified that they might be pregnant, or they had had an abortion, or they were simply very confused and upset about a relationship that they were in. Now, UCLA is one of the top universities in my country, and you have to be a really exceptionally good student to get in there. So the kids that I was seeing were the kids that were coming into my office were very bright, ambitious kids, and you just, you wouldn't expect them to not have the information that they needed to know about sexuality. And yet here I was, seeing them, and there were basic things that I'm going to describe to you soon that they were not aware of. So I started doing some research, and I realized that my profession, the mental health profession, and also the profession of sexual education, was taken over by radical, I'll call them activists, radical activists that had a certain vision for how the world should be. And instead of being focused on keeping people healthy and making smart health decisions, they were promoting a certain worldview that in fact would bring more kids into the doctor's office instead of keeping them out. Excuse me. And so as a result of my research, okay, I'm not able to advance my slide here. and I don't know why. Because normally I can advance my slide.
Did you do slideshow from the start?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I did. Okay, I'll have to do it this way, I guess. Okay, so wait a minute. Do you guys see on top of this current slide, do you see that bar that has all the directions? No, you just see the book, right? You just see the book Unprotected?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I wrote this book, Unprotected, a campus psychiatrist reveals how political correctness in her profession endangers every student. And in this book, every chapter has an example of one or a few students that I saw and how they were harmed by the ideology that's in my profession, the worldview of sexual freedom and the view that traditional morality is oppressive and we need to get away from that, and the view that children are sexual from cradle to grave. I hope that a lot of you have already heard these ideas, and I know that the PCP Wales did a fantastic YouTube on the history of sex education, and they went into that. But anyway, so I wrote this book and I became aware of these problems within sex education. And then I did more research and I wrote another book. Here we go. And that book was called You're Teaching My Child What? And this book really is focused on the falsehoods in sex education and how they harm children. So what I'm going to be doing is taking some of the information, the medical information that I provide in these books, and I'm going to explain to you why RSE is dangerous to your kids. Now, first of all, if there's anything that I want you to know, that I want you to walk away from this lecture, it's that the number one priority of sexuality education is to promote sexual freedom. Sexual freedom means that that people at any age, from cradle to grave, are sexual beings, and that they have the right to express that sexuality in any way that they are comfortable with, so long as the person that they're with consents to it. So there's no consideration to what age this person is, what kind of cognitive development they have, how well they might be able to understand the consequences of what they're doing, whether they are male or female, and so on and so forth. The number one priority is to promote sexual freedom. Now, there's a certain problem that you guys have at this point with your government, and that is that they haven't provided you with the actual curriculum that they're planning on giving to the schools. You don't actually know what's in it, and that is a big problem, because when you look at the documents that present the guidelines or the philosophy behind it, there's many pages, hundreds of pages of things that sound quite good and quite noble, and it says that we're going to educate your children, and we're going to make sure that they know how to stay safe and that they have the information that they need, and we respect family, and it all sounds very good. The problem is, and what I have discovered through the years, and I've done this for many different communities and different countries, what you have to do, you can't you can't be misled by that. If you are misled and you say, oh, well, this sounds good, you know, I'll go for this. This sounds like what I would like for my child. You are going to be shocked later on when you see what their kids really are going to be taught. And so what I typically do, and what I did in this case, is that I went to the document Relationships and Sexuality Education. There's something called Annex C at the end of it, and they have links to external support organizations. It's on page 19. And you will see there that they link to an organization called childline.org.uk. Now, I want to carefully go through what this website, childline.org.uk, presents to children, because this tells us what RSE is going to be based on, what the kind of approach that they're going to be taking to educating and guiding your children. So first of all, they have on that website a page in which kids go to when they're not sure if they're ready to have sex or not. And so on this page, one option is to get support from our counselors. And what this coming slide is going to tell you what the counselors are going to tell the child. The only person who can decide if you're ready is you. Now, this is a big deal, okay? Because think of what we tell people about, or to our kids, for example, about diet, smoking, drinking, drugs, tanning salons. We don't tell them the only person who can decide if you're ready is you. We tell them the medical information that they need. We tell them, don't do this. It's dangerous, and this is why it's dangerous. And there's consequences that you're going to have to face if you do the following things. So we strongly advise you to avoid drugs, to avoid alcohol, you get my drift. But in this case, what they're saying is only you can decide. If you're thinking about having sex, these are the questions you should ask yourself. Do I have contraception? Do I know about safe sex? Can I talk to my partner about having sex? Do I feel comfortable with having sex? Will my partner support me if I don't have sex? And will I feel less mature if I don't have sex? If you answer no to any of these questions, you may not be ready to have sex. Now let's look at this. Let's say you have a daughter, you have a granddaughter. She's 12 or 14, and she's met somebody that she really likes. And she's thinking, maybe I should have sex with him. And she comes to this webpage. Well, do I have contraception? Yeah, I mean, maybe she's gotten something, she's gone somewhere to a clinic, or maybe the boy that she knows has gone somewhere. Do I know about safe sex? Yes. Can I talk to my partner about having sex? Yes. Do I feel comfortable? Yeah, I think so. And so on and so forth. She can easily answer yes to all these questions. You know what? At no point are these so-called experts, these counselors, that your child is the government is saying that your child should go on a website such as this and trust the information that they're giving them. At no point do they say, well, how old are you? How old is your partner? At no point do they talk about what some of the consequences might be, and that there might be huge, devastating consequences, even if you have contraception. They never talk about speaking to your parents. And this is all terribly alarming. I think that you would agree. And the reason why they're giving this guidance, quote unquote, to kids is this goes back to the whole philosophy that this is based on, that everyone at every point of their life is a sexual being, and has the right to experience sexual pleasure in any way that they want, so long as they're using protection, quote unquote, and it's consensual. That no one can come in, no parent or doctor or teacher or any adult can come in and say, you know what, darling, you're not ready for this. This is for adults. Sex is an adult behavior. It's a very big deal with really big consequences, and you're just not ready. You see, that would go against the philosophy that's behind all this. This is more of what they have on this Childline site. You can contact Childline about anything. Whatever you're worried, it's better out than in. We're here to support you. There are lots of different ways to speak to a counselor or get support from other young people. Is that what we want? Do we want our young people turning to their peers for guidance about becoming sexually active, doing things that can forever, just one sexual act, as you well know, can change your life forever? You can get pregnant from one sexual encounter. You can get a sexually transmitted infection from one sexual encounter, which can lead to trouble with infertility, lifelong problems with, with herpes, blisters, terrible things. Do we really want our kids being advised by other people? And the counselors, I would sort of like to know who they are. But what they have is a number that you can call for free. And you know what? It won't even show on their bill. So parents, if you have your child, your teenager has a phone, it's not going to show on the bill that they called this place for advice. Even more than that, they have a whole website on covering your tracks. If you're worried someone will find out that you've used Childline, our advice can help you keep your visits private. This is very disturbing, and this is furthermore undermining parental authority and undermining the whole family unit, because relationships within the family and outside the family are based on trust. This website is instructing your child to go behind your back and get information that you may not want her or him to have, guidance that you may not agree with. And they're all being instructed to do this in a way that you won't find out. Now, a little bit more on the site, this Childline site, they have information about abortion. And for kids that are asking, how do I know what's right or wrong? They say, speak to our counselors. Now, I would imagine that every responsible parent wants their child to learn about what's right and wrong from within the family, not from a random counselor who works for this website. So this is very disturbing. And finally, the website talks about getting help with decisions, the decision of having an abortion, and I've put it in red here just to highlight that they say you don't have to talk to your parents. And they're saying, we're here to talk to you. We are here to support you. You don't have to talk to your parents. So this is a red flag, a big red flag. Your government is going to direct your children to websites such as this. So here's some of the medical information that your teenager will not be getting from RSE. First of all, we all know, anyone that's had anything to do with a teenager knows that they're not fully mature in terms of their thinking, right? And that is because this has been well known within the medical field for now 30 years, that the teen brain is immature, and it doesn't fully mature into an adult brain actually until the mid-20s. And the part of the brain that matures last is a part of the brain that's right behind the forehead, and it's called the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is the part of the brain that's like the grown-up. It's the CEO of the brain. It's the part of the brain that can think rationally and calmly. Do I want to do this or not? What could happen? What could be the possible consequences? What might I feel tomorrow if I do such and such right now? Is this a smart decision? So that's the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that is underdeveloped in teenagers, which is why they're impulsive. They do silly things, they do stupid things. And when they come to us the next day as parents and we say to them, like, why did you do that? What were you thinking when you did that? And the teenager will say, you know what? I wasn't thinking. It's true. They weren't thinking when they made some dumb or dangerous, risky decision. Because in teenagers, it's been found that many times when they're in highly stimulating situations, when they're driving fast or they're on a roller coaster or they're bungee jumping or they're in a sexually stimulating situation, it's other parts of their brain, what called more their emotional parts of their brain, that take over, okay? And they just like go for it. They're not using the mature parts of their brain. And this has been a very good example of how we are aware of this. In this country, in my country, we have a company called Allstate, and it's an insurance company. And Allstate has an advertisement that says, why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? You see, because Allstate has to explain to parents why insurance for a 16-year-old, you can get your license in many states here in the US when you're 16, but the insurance for your 16-year-old is going to be, through the roof. And so they make this explanation here in their advertisement. Why do most 16-year-olds drive like they're missing a part of their brain? And the answer is because they are. They actually are missing a part of their brain. And this Allstate insurance says even bright, mature teenagers sometimes do things that are stupid. But when that happens, it's not really their fault. It's because their brain hasn't finished developing. And they go on and they talk about the prefrontal cortex, and it's not really fully mature until they're in their 20s. Now, if a car insurance company knows this, well, then certainly sexuality educators also know it, and they have an obligation to teach teenagers to be super careful when they get in these situations of high stimulation, because even if they have their condom, and even if they have given consent, and even if they know about safe sex and they can talk to their partners, well, guess what? They might very well do something stupid that they later regret. And that's why they should avoid even getting into that situation. But you see, if they were to say that, this scientific information here about the brain being immature, it goes against the philosophy upon which that RSE is based upon. Again, the philosophy of sexual freedom is primary and not sexual health. What's primary is to teach kids that they are sexual beings, and that's a wonderful thing, and that they have the right to act on their sexual impulses at any time. And adults can't come along and tell them what to do because they have that right. And by the way, without getting, we don't have time to get into it, but there's lots of documents and official statements that have come out of the United Nations and other organizations that affirm this right, a child's right to be sexual and to act on their sexuality without anyone, being able to come in and say that this is not okay. So the RSE plans to tell your kids, starting, I think, at the age of 8, we're going to get to that. They plan to explain to them where they get these rights from and what the documents are from the United Nations and other organizations that give them these rights. But anyway, I have to go on. Okay, so in terms of the teenage brain, one psychobiologist explained it this way. He said that teenagers are more Kirk than Spock. So any of you that know about Star Trek know that Captain Kirk was the emotional guy, okay? And he was always just blurting things out and making decisions, based on his emotions. Whereas Spock rather, was the thinking guy. And in fact, he didn't, his emotions really, we didn't really see Spock have many emotions. He was always in his head. He was always very calm. He was always thinking things out. So teenagers are more Kirk than Spock. I think that's a very good way of putting it. So biology says, wait. That's the message that science gives. Wait until you're an adult. Sex is not for kids. Now, this is a very important piece of information, a chart that also you won't see from that website, what was it called? Childline? That website that was giving all the information for kids. It says on the top, why don't sex educators emphasize that casual sex and multiple partners is a health hazard? Because look, and the reason I put this up is that one of the questions, when you're advising a young person whether to have sex or not, it's not enough to just say, do you have birth control? Do you know about safe sex? Are you being coerced and so forth? You need to know about this person that you're planning to have sex with. And how many partners has that person had? So the reason that that's important is because when you have sex with someone, you're actually, in a way, from a medical perspective, a sexually transmitted infection perspective, you're having sex with everyone that they had sex with. And this chart shows that if there's two people and they have sex with each other, and each of them in the past had sex with 2 people, and each of those 2 people had sex with 2 people, and onward and onward, you're actually having sex, so to speak. You're being exposed to a lot of STIs, many more than you might imagine. So one of those questions that you want to have, one of those conversations that we have to tell kids before they have sex with people is, well, get some sexual history. And these are adult conversations. Now, another thing that kids need to be told is about how girls and women are more vulnerable than guys. And this is pure science. This comes from the CDC. Biological factors place women at a greater risk from men. And why is that? I'm going to quickly explain to you the science. That is because the opening of the cervix and what you see here on the left side is the cervix. The cervix is the opening to the uterus. The cervix is the area that gets infected with a number of dangerous sexually transmitted infections like the human papillomavirus, chlamydia, and other things. And this can happen, by the way, even if a condom is worn. So in a teenager, the cervix is generally covered by only one cell. It's a very delicate surface. If you look at the diagram on the right, you see on the right that there's a part of the cervix that only has those single cells. And on the other side, on the left side, you see that there's many layers. What happens is that as a girl gets older, that area changes and it grows many more layers so that it's harder to infect. It's called this area is called the transformation zone because with time it transforms and it sort of grows its own protective layer. But in younger girls, there's a huge area of the cervix that is not protected. And so it's much easier for the bacteria or the virus to get in there. So this is a picture of what the immature cervix looks like. And then this next picture shows what an adult cervix looks like. And it's covered by that thicker cell surface. Now, I have always felt that these pictures, which we've had for decades and decades, I mean, if you can look at a GYN textbook from like the 70s, and you will see these photographs. These pictures need to be front and center. Our girls need to know this. Boys don't have this issue to contend with. Unless we're talking about anal sex in boys, in which the boy, I'm going to try not to get off on this topic, but when a boy is the receptive partner for anal intercourse, then the entire anal canal is also lined with only this thin, one cell thick membrane. And that's one of the reasons why anal intercourse is so dangerous. But back to what we're talking over here. One of the things that RSE is not going to tell your kids is that girls are more vulnerable and they're going to pay a heavier price for early sexual behavior than boys are. In the United States, 1 in 4 girls have a sexually transmitted infection, and almost 20% are infected within 1 year of becoming sexually active. And the reason for that is their immature cervix. And the girls that sit in front of me when they're a little bit older, and I would tell, I was mentioning to you how at UCLA I would sit with these young women who are 20 or 25 and they've never heard of this stuff. So biology says that girls are more vulnerable than boys. And this, of course, also goes against the narrative that's behind RSE, which they would never, it's against their narrative to say that one group is more vulnerable biologically than another, because we all have to be equal and free, and we all have to be able to behave the same as everybody else, regardless of age or sex. And I use the word sex instead of the word gender, because sex means male or female. I'm not going to get off on that tangent. Okay, biology says wait. Real feminism protects women and girls. Now, the other thing that makes girls more vulnerable, and I'm not saying that boys don't also suffer from early sexual behavior, risky behavior with multiple partners. They do. But in terms of the science that we have, it tells us more about the vulnerability of girls. And one thing that it tells us is that girls are at risk for depression. The developing female brain, with all the hormones and it has a vulnerability to stress and depression, especially following failed relationships, and especially relationships that were sexual in nature. And one neuropsychiatrist who wrote a book about the female brain said, the female brain is so deeply affected by hormones that their influence can be said to create a woman's reality. So I want to go into that a bit. So which hormones are we talking about? Well, one female hormone is called oxytocin. And oxytocin, a very, very interesting hormone that boys and men have as well, but not at the levels that girls do. This is primarily a female hormone. And this hormone is released during intimate behavior, during intimate touching, when people are connecting and staring, you know, into the eyes of someone that they love. It's during orgasm, during touching of the nipples, stimulation, sexual stimulation, and during orgasm. Now, what does oxytocin actually do? Well, a hormone is a chemical that travels from one organ to another organ with a message. And the message of oxytocin is to connect, to emotionally connect and bond with the other person. And there's all kinds of fascinating work that's been done in this area. And if you're interested, I strongly suggest my books and other books as well. But basically, what oxytocin does in a nutshell is it switches love and trust on, and it switches caution and aversion off. And this quote is coming from the book The Female Brain, written by Dr. Brizendine, who's a well-known psychiatric a neurobiologist and psychiatrist who does research into the male and female brains. And so this is very important to know, because even if you're with someone that you just met, your body is going to react the same way. And lo and behold, and I saw this in my office so often, that a young woman could have, you know, what used to be called a one-night stand, or just a casual encounter, casual sexual encounter. Doesn't necessarily even have to be sexual, but you know, the touching and the kissing and all that good stuff that goes on, it causes the release of hormones that send messages. It affects us. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot going on beneath the surface. It's not enough to use a condom or to use birth control pills and to say that you're protected. That does not leave you protected. That is not sufficient protection for our girls or our boys. And that is why you know, the offices of therapists and doctors are filled with people who have been harmed by this philosophy of early sexuality, multiple partners, and just depending on birth control and consent. This is a very destructive philosophy that your children are going to have pounded into them by RSE. Now, I'm just going to quickly, I wanted just to show you that there are so many studies now about how oxytocin causes changes in the brain that make us feel trust toward another person, the person that we're with. Very interesting that oxytocin is being used in people who have autism, because autism, as you probably know, is a disorder in which there's problems with connection, with relating to other people, and oxytocin helps those people feel connected and feel attached and feel trust, which they normally have trouble feeling that. And then there's research that's done with newborn babies on mothers. Anyway, I'm going to go now to another topic, and that is that RSE is going to be mandatory in Wales from age 3. And that's not really up for discussion. From what I can see from the documents, whereas the sex education that you have right now, it's not mandatory. There's an opt-out for parents, but that's going to be gone. If this goes through, that's going to be gone, no opt-out, and they're actually going to have access to your 3-year-old. And what I've done here is present, giving you some photos of 3-year-olds just to remind you what they look like. I mean, 3-year-olds, that should just be a time of the epitome of innocence and joy and learning about your world and learning how things work and how to get along with your friends and how to share toys, get along with your brothers and sisters. That's what life should be like as a 3-year-old. Why in the world would the people behind this want to reach your 3-year-old? And why would they make it mandatory? So we really have to think about this, because the answer that they're going to give you, of course, is that they want to teach your 3-year-old how to protect themselves from being abused, right? Being sexually abused. They want to teach them about good touch and bad touch and all that stuff. Now, I would argue that to teach, I agree that children need to be taught that they can't trust everybody out there. Oh, I have to just get the sun out of my eyes. 1 minute. Okay, so I agree that even a 3-year-old, especially if they're not always with family, and if they're going to be in a situation where they're not with people that they know so well, they should be taught about private parts. And the way you can do that, it's very easy. You just say, the parts of your body that are covered by your bathing suit are called private parts, and those are places that no one should be looking or touching. Like that's not okay. That's only for your parents, the doctor, whoever, there's a babysitter that might be bathing the child. Those people, that's okay. But anyone else, that's not okay. End of discussion. What else do you possibly need to tell a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old more than that about to avoid, to educate them about the fact that, to protect them from child abuse? That's what I'm trying to say. Why do they feel such a need to get to your child? I'll tell you why. You see, they want to normalize for your child the experience of talking about these things in school. They want the child to think that, yeah, I mean, this is normal. School is the place where we talk about these kind of private things about these body parts and about touching what the body parts are called, which is another thing. Is completely ridiculous. A 3-year-old, these kids don't need to know about the proper names: testicles, vulva, vagina. It's just all trying to sexualize the child, focus the child on these parts of their bodies, introduce them to the notion that, yeah, I learn about these things in school, not at home. It's fine to talk about these things, so that later on, when they are, at the next step, 5, 7, 8, 11 years old, and they start hearing much more what should be shocking to them material, they will already be used to it. So that is the nefarious, that is the, I'm not sure what word to use, but it's not about health. And it's something that you should just be saying, over my dead body, are you going to have access to my 3-year-old with this material? I will teach my little children what they need to know at home. I'm perfectly capable of doing that. Also, I want to just tell you that over here at the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, they are saying, you know what? Children have their own words for body parts. Why don't you find out, what is that word? And you can speak to them in a way that they're comfortable. So instead of directing, as RSE is going to say, that, oh, these kids need to, and by the way, how is it that the teachers of RSE are going to teach the little kids about these things? They're going to have a diagram. Well, I would like to see that diagram. They're going to have, how are they going to go about teaching this? But my point here is that the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry is saying that when you talk to your kids about sex, you do not have to use all these fancy terms, for lack of a better word. And furthermore, they say that parents should respond to the needs and curiosity level of their individual child.
Yeah.
And offer them no more or less information than the child is asking for and is able to understand. It just makes me want to scream. Okay, RSE is going to come in and tell your kids all this stuff that they're going to, someone is, I think
Rachel, you've got your mic on. Can you turn your mic off, Rachel?
Thank you.
Okay, Miriam, go ahead. Sorry about that.
So this, which is coming from, this is the professional organization for the psychiatric care of kids and taking care of kids. And this is their advice that you, and let's just say this is so important. You respond to the level of the child. You don't offer more information than what the child is asking for and able to understand. Could you, I want to tell a little story. Do I have enough time? Because I don't know when you want to finish this, Kimberly.
Yeah, we're intrigued. You go ahead, Miriam.
Okay, I'll just do it quickly, but it makes my point. I have a lot of slides left, and I don't want to have to cut short. But a friend of mine who's a psychiatrist told me that once a family came to him, and one of their kids had been increasingly anxious anxious, and they couldn't figure out why. And finally, they brought in the child, and the psychiatrist spoke to the child, and the child said, well, my family is going on a trip, and we're all flying to Europe. And the doctor said, well, that sounds great. Why are you nervous about that? And he said, well, I don't know how to fly. Children are not miniature adults. Children think differently. Children can only absorb certain information into their system. They don't have the cognitive ability. And what RSE does is it just goes in there like a bulldozer to these young kids who aren't asking these questions and don't have a need to know this information that they want to give them at an early age. And that is not healthy and not good, and you want to stop that. Okay, let me just move forward. I want to present to you this quote from a famous child psychologist, Chaim Gino, and he said, children are like wet cement. Whatever falls on them makes an impression. I promise you, if your kids are hearing information at school about sexuality, bisexuality, anal intercourse, gender, you may not be a girl, you may not be a boy or a girl, it makes an impression on them. They're going to remember that. And this is why, again, I'm going back to the fact that that Childline, that website that your government is going to suggest to your kids, this is the opposite of what we want for our kids. We want to be in control of what kind of information your kid is going to get, especially in this area. Now, UNESCO says that from ages 5 to 8, and I got this from a UNESCO document, the goals of sexuality education, teach children their rights and what the laws and agreements are. And you know what? When they're going to do a good job teaching that, and before you know it, when your child is 9 or 10 or 11 and they're getting onto websites that you don't like, they're going to say, I have the right. They're going to point to these documents from the UN. I have the right to get this information. For ages 9 to 12, students should demonstrate respect for diverse practices relating to sexuality. What do they mean by diverse? You're going to see at the end of this talk some examples of what they mean by diverse. Ages 12 to 15, students should learn to question social and cultural norms. So they want them to start questioning. And then, and what that means, of course, is questioning the family, the messages that you're going to be giving them at home. They want students to learn to question those things. And then at age 15, they should appreciate that they need to develop their own perspectives on sexual behavior. Not what their family tells them, not what their church tells them, not what their doctor tells them. Again, the number one priority of sexuality education is to promote sexual freedom. And I want you to understand that when sexual freedom reigns, sexual health suffers, because you can't have it both ways. Okay, if you're going to be sexually free and start sexual behavior at a young age, which means you're going to have multiple partners, because when you start at a young age, you have more partners, your sexual health is going to suffer. If two people wait until they are young adults and then they decide that they are going to be they're going to commit to each other in their relationship, they never have to worry. These are two adults that never had a sexual relationship with anybody else. They will never have to worry about a sexually transmitted infection. And that is a fact. And that is a fact that young people need to hear. It's an ideal. Many people will not reach that ideal, of course, but many people, we present an ideal of an ideal weight, an ideal exercise schedule, an ideal of keeping away from drugs and alcohol. So we can also, sexuality is an appetite. It's a wonderful, healthy appetite. And we want to tell kids this. But like all appetites, it needs to be, you need to have self-control. And you need to have goals. Just like you do, if you're an athlete, you're going to have goals, you're going to have discipline, you're going to wake up early, work out, avoid fatty foods, et cetera, et cetera. So what I've done next is I'm bringing you some slides that I actually showed when I spoke at the House of Lords 9 years ago. And Lisa's on this currently with us now. And Lisa, thank you again for your support and bringing me over to London and allowing me to speak. So this is what I discovered was going to be presented to kids through the RSE program in the UK. This is one slide from a website called I think it's Family Planning Association, which is, I think, what your Planned Parenthood is called. So I'm not going to read, I'm just going to let, there's people that can't read it. Okay, I mean, there's people that are only hearing, they're just listening, so I will read it. The first slide says, a fetishist is a person who's turned on by a particular thought, activity, or object, such as the feel or smell of leather. And this is meant for kids who are age 11 and up. The next slide, the sexy stuff, a guide for guys who like guys. And this is from the National Health Service of the UK. I'm sorry, I mean, I hope no one's about to have dinner or just had dinner. Rimming is when someone uses their mouth and tongue to explore someone else's bum. You might cringe at the very thought, but some people enjoy it. And this is the same thing about the same behavior. And it says lots of people enjoy rimming because there are lots of sensitive nerve endings around the anus. The next one is about bondage. It says bondage for beginners, from tying up to blindfolding. Here's how to play it safe. This was from a website called thesite.org, which was also recommended by Relationship Sexuality Education by the UK. This is recommended to kids. And the last one is a question. Someone is asking, is it okay for my girlfriend to pee into my mouth? It turns me on. Is that normal? And the answer given is that different things sexually arouse different people. The important thing to remember is not to pressurize your partner into doing anything they are not comfortable with. So let this sink in, folks. I'm just going to give you a moment to let this sink in. This will all be brought into your child's life, into your home, if you let RSE come into your country. RSE is an attack on innocence. It's an attack on girls. It's an attack on family. And it's an attack on traditional morality, which are all things that I believe your culture, the Welsh culture, believes in. So I'm going to ask you, the people of Wales, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Is it going to be sexual freedom or sexual health for your young people? Because you are at the crossroads. This is it. If this goes through, this is it. You don't turn around. So are you going to let it happen, or are you going to say, over my dead body, are my kids going to be exposed to this stuff? And that's my question, and I'm going to stop here and we can do some discussion.